Hi, in this video, I'm going to go over the hardbacks that sit on a lot of these shelves down near the bottom underneath all the paperbacks that I've already gone over. This first group of books is a bunch of books that I've already read, and I keep them around because I like them enough not to get rid of them because I someday might reread them. I'm not sure. Anyway, this one's called Hitler Victorious. It's basically an anthology of short stories that kind of take on the premise of what if Hitler had won World War II, and there's some pretty good stuff in this. And we have this nice, I don't know if it's real leather, I think it's faux leather, copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, complete and unabridged. This goes Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe, and Everything, and So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. It's also got a short story called Young Zaphod Keeps It Safe, or Young Zaphod Plays It Safe. And then we've got The Thief of Always from my old Clive Barker stint, back when I was really into Clive Barker. This one actually has illustrations by him in it. See one right there. Another one there. So then we get Immable's Territory. I've said before in other videos, I always felt like this was like half the story, and I'm wondering if she's ever going to write more to it, which is really the only reason I keep this around. It was a good book. The characters were interesting, especially the main character, but it just felt like it was only half the story, so I was really disappointed with it, but I keep it just in case she ever decides to do more with it. Here we got Carter Beats the Devil. Book takes place in the early 1900s. It's a really good book about a magician that ends up having to help somebody really important. Just a really good book. I wish it'd be cool if they made it a movie. If it's not already made into a movie, I'm not sure. I've never really tried to find out. Anyway, pretty good. If you ever get a chance to read this and you like semi-historical fiction, read it. It's pretty good. And then my favorite author, here's the Anubis Gates, probably his most famous book, 10 Powers. So I've read this a couple times. We get to another one by Powers, Declare. This one's really good. It's about a guy that kind of works with Kim Philby at one point. It's about a spy and genies are involved, and it has to do with the whole conflict, the Cold War between Russia and the US. It's pretty entertaining. We got this little book. I forget where I got this. This is called The Devil's in the Details. So James Blaylock and Tim Powers. They've known each other a long time, I guess, and write some things together or work on things together sometimes. And then 3 Days to Never, another one I've read a couple times. I enjoyed this one. This one has to do with like remote viewing and spies and Israel and some weird stuff that happened with Einstein back when he was alive. So it's a pretty good book. It's modern day, but it draws on some stuff that happened in Einstein's life. So entertaining book there. And the last of the Power stuff, the William Ashbliss Memorial Cookbook. I really only bought it because it was Tim Powers. William Ashbliss is a character that him and I think James Blaylock and him came up with. Just he's like supposed to be like a poet from the 1800s, but then we get to R.A. Salvatore, the Dark Elf trilogy. Read this a couple times. You know, anybody that's familiar with the Forgotten Realms and Dungeons and Dragons has probably heard of Drizzt Do'Urden or Dritz Do'Urden, if you want to say it a certain way, you know. So that one. And then the Icewind Dale trilogy right there. This was actually written before the other one, but it's really entertaining fantasy. So if you get a chance to read it, do so. And then here's one more with Drizzt, Passage Passage to Dawn. This one shines like that because it's got this cover that makes that noise there. There's that. And then Siege of Darkness with more Dro in it than you can shake a stick at. And then probably one of my favorite, one of my books of one of my fantasy books that has one of my favorite endings of all time in it. The fight near the end, the last thing that happens in this book, I think, is between Drizzt Do'Urden and Dantrag Baenra. Bainray. I don't know how you say it. Anyway, it's a great fight, and just the way it ends, I read this 30 years ago, and I've never forgotten the way it ends. And then there's The Legacy, which is the next book in Drizzt's series. And then The Silent Blade. This one's pretty good because it deals with the conflict between Drizzt and Artemis Entreri, and tries to draw a conclusion to that. But yeah, you got to read it to find out. It's really good. And then this one I don't like so much, but I keep it just to make sure I've got a kind of a complete set. I don't really have a complete set, but anyway, The Spine of the World. This one focuses more on Wolfgar with some of the little essay things by Drizzt in the middle of it. So, and then The Sea of Swords. Another one, you can see Drizzt there on the front. So continuing on with Drizzt, we've got the Hunter's Blades trilogy. This is The Thousand Orcs. So I read these when they came out. Here is The Lone Drow, book 2. There's some really good stuff in this, dealing with, I think it's Khazad-Hea, the sword that is intelligent and tries to take over everybody that picks it up. And then the Two Swords. This one might be the one that has all the Khazad-Hea stuff, but it starts to build up in the second book, I think. So there's that. It's been a while since I read them, so if I'm wrong, don't get mad at me in the comments. Here's one with Jarlaxle Bainray, Servant of the Shard. It's pretty good. Starts a trilogy with him and Artemis Entreri doing some stuff. Here's Promise of the Witch King. Again, Jarlaxle and Artemis. You can see Artemis here on the front right there. It's Artemis and Jarlaxle. I forget who that is, though. And then Road of the Patriarch, which I had this book forever because I bought it in hardback when it came out, and I finally got around to reading it last year for whatever reason. Just sat down, decided to get through it, and it was really good. So there you go. Now some more Clive Barker. Now we're to the books that I haven't read, and this is Abarat by Clive Barker. See some of the art there. There's art in this one too, I think. You know, there's full color art in this one. So pretty interesting stuff. He likes to use a lot of color in his images sometimes. There's one that's kind of pretty cool right there. Anyway, there's that. And then I've got the second one, which is Abarat Days of Magic, Knights of War. Abarat Days of Magic, Knights of War. Second book in that series. I don't know if he ever wrote more of them, though. There's art in this one, too. Anyway, then we get to Rainbow Six, Tom Clancy. This one focuses on John Clark, the former Navy SEAL that became an operative. Did a lot of work with Jack Ryan in, Clear and Present Danger and Sum of All Fears and Without Remorse, which was actually not Jack Ryan. That was mostly John Clark. Anyway, I've read a lot of those. I read Red Storm Rising, which isn't Jack Ryan, and I've read. Which of those have I read? Clear and Present Danger, Sum of All Fears, Debt of Honor, Executive Orders, Without Remorse. I think those are all the ones I've read. Hunt for Red October. And I also have The Bear and the Dragon. So one of these days I'll get to that. And then some suspense stuff, I guess. Harlan Coben's Long Lost. I think I have this because my wife picked it up at a yard sale. Another Harlan Coben, The Woods. And then I don't know if this is religious fiction or not. This is the Angel Walk trilogy by Roger Elwood. It's got Angel Walk, Fallen Angel, and Steadfast Guardian in it. You see the image on the front there. Looks like an angel. And here's Jack Higgins, who's probably most famous for writing The Eagle Has Landed, which is a World War II novel. This one's called Angel of Death. He's written a ton of novels, ton of thriller novels with various series type characters. This one sits on top of some books. That's why it's not in alphabetical order here, but this is Greg Bear's Dinosaur Summer. See, this one's got some full color picture plates in it, which are pretty cool. And then Star Wars from a certain point of view. All stories about the creatures in the cantina, I think, in Star Wars. Next up, we have L. Ron Hubbard's Mission Earth. This is like a 10-volume series that starts with The Invaders Plan, and then Black Genesis, and The Enemy Within. I've read these 3 and the next 3 in the series, but I never managed to finish the series for some reason. It's 10 books. I don't know why I never plowed through the last 4. Continuing with Mission Earth, we've got An Alien Affair here, Fortune of Fear, Death Quest, Voyage of Vengeance, Disaster, number 8 there. Number 9, Villainy Victorious. Finally, The Doomed Planet. And this whole series is basically a spoof on the Central Intelligence Agency. The main agency in this is called the Coordinated Information Apparatus, which is CIA, if you write it out. These are entertaining. They're a little bit of their time, though. They were written in the 80s. So you can kind of see some of the attitudes that Hubbard had coming through in the writing, or might have had. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It's all kind of a satire anyway, but I found it entertaining. So then we have some serious stuff. John Irving, Widow for 1 Year, right there. A couple books by J.V. Jones, Cavern of Black Ice, A Fortress of Gray Ice. Some epic fantasy there for you. And then we get to probably the longest single story series I have. This is The Wheel of Time. Right here's New Spring, which I guess is kind of a prologue to the whole series. Not 100% sure. That one I haven't read. Then we have The Eye of the World, which I have read, and The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn. And I read somewhere that initially this was only supposed to be a trilogy, but I guess it was so popular they just like blew it up into a huge thing. I'm not really sure though. This one reads like it's gonna bring an ending to the series. And if I was reading them as they came out and I had gotten this, I would have thought this might be the end of it as I was reading it. But since I didn't start reading it until I think it was 5 or 6 books in, then I didn't I knew that it wasn't going to end where I thought it was going to end. And then the 4th book is called The Shadow Rising. And I've read up through this book, and by the time I got to the end of this book, this one felt a bit like a slog, even though it was pretty good. There were times where it was kind of sloggy. And even though I had a couple more books, after I had read the 4th book, I felt like I needed to wait until the series was completely done, just so I could be able to keep track of everything in my own head while I was reading it. Otherwise, I knew I'd forget things if I tried to read them as they came out. And not being big on rereading most books, especially books the size these things are, I decided to stop there and just wait until the whole thing was out. But as luck would have it, I still haven't gotten to it, even though the whole thing's been done for years now. Also sitting on top of those books is John Brunner's Stand on Zanzibar. So there's that. It's a classic of science fiction. And then a long time ago when I was still single, this book came out and I thought maybe I should buy that one day in case I ever do get married and have kids. And my son really seems to like this book from time to time. He picks it up and looks at it and asks me about things in it. This is called The Dangerous Book for Boys. And it's full of information and like little things you can do and experiments and that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting book. Continuing with The Wheel of Time, here's book 5, The Fires of Heaven. Lord of Chaos, book 6. A Crown of Swords. The Path of Daggers. I've read reviews that said make it sound like there's a real lull between those last three books, like the story kind of dips really bad. If you've read it and you know, tell me in the comments. Winter's Heart, book 9. They all have these great Daryl K. Sweet covers on them. I've always really liked his art. Here's book 10, Crossroads of Twilight. Then book 11, Knife of Dreams. And I think shortly after this was done, or after this one was done and published, was when Robert Jordan ended up passing away, and he had turned the torch over to Brandon Sanderson. So then we get book 12, The Gathering Storm. Book 13, Towers of Midnight. See how chunky these things are. And this one's 800 pages. And then the final book, 14, A Memory of Light. I really like this cover for whatever reason. It's just something about the position and what he's doing and the color of his outfit there. And the last three books on that little bit of shelf right there are the first three books in Greg Keyes's quadrology. Kingdom of Thorn and Bone is what it is. This is The Briar King. And the disappointing thing about this is, look at this cover here. This is how it looks. And then you get book 2, and they've completely changed the style. So here's book 2, The Carnal Prince. Book publishers really shouldn't do this. They should make things the same across all the books in a series, or similar in all the books in a series. Then we get the Blood Knight. I've seen videos of other booktubers complaining about that very thing. So that's the third book in that. And the final book in Kingdom of Thorn and Bone starts the next shelf off right there, The Born Queen. And here's a book that I borrowed from somebody that I worked with a long time ago, and I felt guilty for years because I never gave it back to her. This is Stephen King and Peter Straub, The Talisman. Started reading that once and kind of bounced off of it a little bit. Only got like 50 or 60 pages into it and set it down, never picked it up again. Don't know why. Someday I'll get back to it. Then we have Dream Songs, Volume 1 by George R.R. Martin. This one's full of short stories, short fiction by him. So in case you didn't know, if the only thing you're familiar with is A Song of Ice and Fire, he wrote a lot of shorter fiction before that. So if you get a chance, pick this book up. And pick up Volume 2, which I also have. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, Stephen Barnes, Beowulf's Children. No idea what this one's about. Science fiction. Great cover by Michael Wellen. Another guy who is just a phenomenal cover artist. Michael Wellen. It's amazing. God, if I wrote a book and somebody said, hey, Michael Wellen's going to do your cover art, I would be like, oh my God. Edgar Allan Poe, Complete Stories. I have this copy. I don't know why I keep it, because you can get all these things online for free nowadays at Project Gutenberg. J.D. Robb, Naked in Death. I think this is a thriller. And then Salman Rushdie, 2 years, 8 months, and 28 nights. I think I picked this one up because it sounds like it deals with people that have supernatural powers, kind of like superheroes almost. So one of these days I'll get around to reading that, and then maybe pick up some other Salman Rushdie. I don't know. Some more R.A. Salvatore, The Cleric Quintet. It's 5 books that star a character named Catterley. So he's a cleric. These are supposed to be pretty good. There's one of the Drizzt books he shows up in because they go to him for some help on something. So a little more Salvatore. So I used to have a copy of The Demon Awakens, but I read that book and then didn't feel like lugging it around anymore, which was a stupid decision because I hadn't read the rest of the books, which I still have. And this is book 2, The Demon Apostle. And then The Demon Spirit, book 3 of the original Demon Wars trilogy. We get into Mortalis. And I've seen things where he said this artist really, this is almost kind of a representation of his brother who passed away from a long illness. And he said that the artist really knocked it out of the park with capturing the debilitating nature of whatever it was that he was sick with. So Mortalis right there. And then Ascendance, which is book 1 of the second Demon Wars saga. And Transcendence. And finally, Immortalis, the conclusion of the second Demon Wars saga. I think this is the last Salvatore I have right here, the Highwayman, in hardback anyway. So there's that. And something with ties to R.A. Salvatore is this one here, R.A. Salvatore's War of the Spider Queen. This is book 1, Disillusion by Richard Lee Byers. And we have book 2, Insurrection by Thomas M. Reed. You can see there. Condemnation by Richard Baker, book 3. Extinction by Lisa Smedman. And book 5, Annihilation by Philip Athens. And finally, Resurrection by Paul S. Kemp. Next, we have historical fiction. This is Jeff Shara's World War II series. This is book 1, The Rising Tide. Then The Steel Wave. And then No Less Than Victory. Got all 3 of these for $1 from a thrift store. I was pretty happy when I found the complete series. Then I've got this book. This is J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst. This is called, or that's what it says on the spine here, but I don't know if that's right. This is Ship of Theseus by B.M. Straka. Right here. I don't really know what this is about, but it's got a bunch of, almost looks like it's a notebook of things. You know, it's got all kinds of crazy stuff in it. You know, oops, like this thing just fell out. You know, it's like a postcard with a old timey newspaper clipping type thing going on in it. So one of these days, maybe I'll get to that. It's got this little navigation thing. I don't know what this is, but it spins around there. I don't even know if the slipcase goes with this, honestly. It's the slipcase, the big S. You can see it there. So then we get to Neil Stephenson's Baroque Cycle, book 1, Quicksilver. You could kill a small dog with this thing. This is a heavy, heavy book. And so is the sequel, the second book, The Confusion here. And then The System of the World, which is still pretty heavy itself. So you could probably kill a beagle if you dropped this trilogy on them. Would be sad. Then we get Coco by Peter Straub. It's about a group of Vietnam vets trying to figure out who's murdering some people, and it goes all the way back to their history in Vietnam because they're seeing the same kind of stuff with the murders that are occurring. And then something I've mentioned in another video, I think, the annotated Dragonlance Chronicles right here. So you can see it's the text of the story, and then you've got notes in the margins here. So here we have the Thackeray T. Lambshead Cabinet of Curiosities, edited by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. I know they're into Jeff Vandermeer writes some pretty weird, interesting fiction, so I'm sure that'll be pretty good. Next up is a book that I really loved as a kid. It's Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends. So one of these days I'll probably read these with my kids. Really entertaining little silly poems in those. Then we've got a science fiction book club edition. Maybe it was only published by them, I'm not sure. This is Down These Dark Spaceways. Contains 6 science fiction stories. I've read this one. I didn't really like about half the stories, but the other half were pretty good. So What I really like about this book in particular is that the jacket art is by Donato Giancola, who is one of my favorite current artists these days. And then again, more jacket art by Donato Giancola right there. You can see it. But this one is called Alien Crimes. So it's along the same lines as that first book. I think it's got 6 stories in it as well. Yeah, 6 stories. So, and they kind of, I guess they kind of go together. Maybe they were printed as a set. And then, and I wasn't a member of the Science Fiction Book Club when I got these two. I found these either online used or in a used bookstore. I don't remember for sure. But at one point I was a member of the Science Fiction Book Club and I got this. So I've had this book for decades. This is Myth Adventures by Robert Lynn Asprin. And this one it's got Another Fine Myth, Myth Conceptions, Myth Directions, and Hit or Myth. So 4 books in it. I read 2 of them way back in the 80s when I first got it. They were entertaining. They're funny. And then I've got some more Clive Barker stuff. This is, oh my God. Holy crap. I have been looking for this bookmark for years. I thought I had lost it. This is a bookmark that came in my paperback copy of Imagica. So when you bought the paperback copy, it had this perforated edge that was folded over and you could fold it out and then tear it off and make a bookmark out of it. And I worked at a printing shop where they had a laminator, so I laminated this thing. I didn't even realize it was in this book right here, this Clive Barker book, Incarnations. So now I'm really glad I made this video. Happy to have found this. So yeah, it's like finding 20 bucks in your pocket. Makes me really happy. Here's another Science Fiction Book Club edition, The Chronicles of the Darini, Darini Rising, Darini Checkmate, and High Darini by Catherine Kurtz. Right there. Haven't read any of those. Heard they're really good though. This is the Saga of Pliocene Exile, The Many-Colored Land and the Golden Torque, books 1 and 2 in this by Julian May. You can see it's got this great wraparound cover here, right there. So I read the first half of the first book a couple times when I was a kid, but I think I was just too young to get into it. So one of these days I'll get around to it. Here's the the 3rd and 4th book in that series, The Non-Born King and the Adversary, right there. There's what the rest of the cover looks like. You got like this rainbow bridge. I don't know if she's stealing from Norse mythology or what, but there's that. You can see it's a little rough. I've had this, like I said, for decades. I got these from a thrift shop, so they're not the copies that I read, but they are copies of the ones I read, if that makes sense. They're from the same printing, I guess. I don't know. This is the Elric saga, Elric of Melniboné, the Sailor on the Seas of Fate, and the Weird of the White Wolf. Right there. Those first 3 Elric books. And then the second 3, part 2 of the saga. This is The Vanishing Tower, The Bane of the Black Sword, and Stormbringer. And this one, Elric Saga, part 2. So Science Fiction Book Club editions. My brother had actually gotten those, and that's why I had read them in that form years ago. And then here's a book by John Myers Myers called Silverlock. I bought this because the guy I worked with said there was all kinds of allusions and references and hidden little, almost like Easter egg type things in this book. I haven't read it, so I don't know yet. I think there's things online that actually go over it and tell you. And here's Tim Powers, Powers of Two. This contains an Epitaph in Rust and The Skies Discrowned, which are his earliest 2 novels there. And that cover is by Bob Eggleton, who is pretty well known for doing a lot. I think he did a lot of Brian Lumley's covers for his Necroscope and some of his Titus Crow books, some of his Cthulhu Mythos type stuff. The Bromeliad by Terry Pratchett. I don't think this is related to Discworld at all, but I think my brother had this and gave it to me. Sidney Sheldon, Master of the Game. No idea why I even keep this. Probably never read it, but maybe one day I'll run out of everything else and that'll be all I got left. Here's another one, Memories of Midnight. So it'll probably be a race between these two to be the last couple books I ever read. Here's another book that I have that I got from the Science Fiction Book Club. And the reason I have this book, I never would have bought this book on my own, but if you were ever a member of that club, you probably know that they would send you a thing that said, this is the pick of the month or whatever. And if you didn't respond and say, no, I don't want that, they would send it to you, and then you'd use up your credit or whatever it is that you got, whether you, I think maybe you had to pay for it at that point instead of using credit systems. But this is A Door into Ocean by Joan Slonczewski. So it's got a pretty cool cover on it. Kind of like the cover, little almost living island there. It's pretty cool, but I haven't read this one, but it's pretty well known. A lot of people have heard of it. And for the last shelf of hardbacks, we start off with Cordwainer Smith's The Rediscovery of Man, a bunch of short stories by him. The Wolfen by Whitley Strieber. There was a movie of this years ago in the 80s, I think. And then Halting State by Charles Stross. I started to read this. I got about 30 or 40 pages into it, but it's written in second person, and I just don't like second person fiction. So I set it down thinking maybe I'd try it again someday when I have a more open mind. Jack Vance's The Kraken, or The Kragen. I don't know. This is a very, very short, tiny book. So you'd think I would just sit down and plow through it. Started to read it once, but it was a little confusing in the beginning and I didn't continue with it. Now we get to some really old books. I bought all of these at a charity auction at work, and I think I paid maybe $5 for them, but they're all, I think, they're all older than me. So that kind of tells you how old they are. If they're not older than me, then they're almost as old as me. Here is The Fourth Galaxy Reader. If you don't know, Galaxy was a magazine way back in the day. Published short stories, kind of like Asimov's, or magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And then there's Analog, a magazine that's still around. This is Analog 6, anthology full of stories from Analog. And then The Many Worlds of Science Fiction, edited by Ben Bova. The Nebula Award Stories, #2, edited by Brian Aldiss and Harry Harrison. And this is from 1966. So this must have been the 65 or 66 Nebula Awards covered in there. Here is The Dancer from Atlantis by Poul Anderson. And here's Omnivore by Piers Anthony. I think you can still get this one online probably as an ebook. And Orn by Piers Anthony. You can see dinosaurs there. Don't know what that one's about. And Chronopolis and Other Stories, a collection by J.G. Ballard, who is well known in science fiction circles. And this is The Ice People by René Barjaval. Sounds like a French name, I don't know. The Ice People. A Torrent of Faces by James Blish and Norman L. Knight, right there. The Last Starship from Earth by John Boyd, whom I don't recall ever hearing of other than this book right here. See, this looks like a bit of a face there. So, I don't know what that's about. Vanguard to Venus by Jeffrey Lloyd Castle. And then there's some books here by a guy named John Christopher. And I don't know if I've got these in the right order, but this is The White Mountains, The City of Gold and Lead. These are all in a series, I think, or they all have the similar characters or characters that go across the books. The Pool of Fire, The Guardians, and The Lotus Caves. You can see these have like the library covering on them. Then we get to Philip Jose Farmer, Down in the Black Gang. Don't know what that's about. And The Overlords of War by Gerard Klein. It says translated by John Brunner, so I'm not sure what the original language was. The Egg-Shaped Thing by Christopher Hodder Williams. So pretty boring cover on that one. The Min in the Jungle by Norman Spinrad. Pendulum by John Christopher. Not sure why this isn't with the other John Christophers. And then Psychogeist by L.P. Davies. You see this one's, the slip cover is all torn up on that. Phoenix by Richard Cowper. And finally, 5 to 12 by Edmund Cooper. And that's it for all the hardbacks I've got down below there under all my paperbacks up here. So there you go. If you've read any of these, comment down below. Let me know if they're any good. If you disagree with anything I said, comment down below. Let me know. And until next time, I'll say bye for now.